Evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And thanks for joining us this evening. We're always delighted to talk to Mike Lupica. Uh, this is the brand new book, Robert B. Parker's Hot Property, long-awaited new Spenser novel. And we do have a very dwindling supply of signed copies left. So if you want one, I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the comments field. If you have questions for Mike or Barbara, go ahead and put them in there, and I'll have Barbara bring me on screen towards the end of the hour here. And I'll ask any questions you might have. So over to you, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Mike, it's wonderful to see you. Let me just add a coda to what Patrick had to say is that thanks to a generous customer who returned her books to us, we have a large collection of Robert B. Parker novels and possibly all three of his major series, or four actually, signed by Bob, as well as a few signed by Mike and a couple signed by Ace Atkins, who wrote the Spencers. First it was Bob, then it was Ace, now it's Mike for Spenser. Anyway, Patrick could put a link to just that whole collection if he
Yeah,
feels like it.
I could do that. Sure.
Yeah, because it's really fun. I was going to go get my copy of the Godwolf manuscript and flash it, show it off, but I didn't do that. Anyway, here we are talking about Hot Property. And in this book, Rita Fiore, who has been a constant presence and a real aggravation to Susan Spenser for obvious reasons, um, is actually the first hit in this book. So I can see you had fun with that, Mike.
I wanted to make this personal. I wanted to make this deeply personal for Spenser. And I had actually, I had it in the back of my mind when I started this book. I wanted to have some sort of a George Santos like character.
Who
But
could resist him? Right. He's better than fiction.
as my editor said, you George Santos in your hands is like a dream combination. But I wanted to make this intensely personal and get it off to a rip roaring start. And as Spenser says at the beginning, they're having a snow filled Boston winter. The weathermen are talking about the snow fall like it's porn every night on television. And he says he feels like it's been snowing in Boston since the autumn equinox. And Rita is on her way to the gym one morning in a snowstorm and gets shot in a drive-by and only gets saved because a FedEx truck happens to pull around the corner, and it just happens to be driven by a former EMT. And he can see how badly she's hurt. There's no more shots. She gets her to the hospital, but she is hovering between life and death in the opening part of this book. And that starts the action. And it's, you've heard me say this before. I'm always amazed. I just like to get these characters talking, as Elmore Leonard used to say. And I'm always stunned when a plot breaks out. But this one's pretty complicated. And the MacGuffin in this turns out to be a piece of valuable land in Boston where two rich guys want to build a casino. And my dear friend, William Goldman, the great William Goldman, used to say, you don't need 6 or 7 people for a bidding war. You just need 2 people who badly want the same thing. And these 2 rich guys want the same thing, but there's more going on than that because Rita, it turns out, has had an affair with this young, charismatic state Senate president who has died in a mysterious drowning accident the previous fall. And he's the boy wonder of Boston politics. And that connection and this land, and because he was a Senate president, he's in the middle of brokering who's going to end up. I took some liberties with how land is allocated in Boston with the city council and the Senate, but it's a lot of fun, and the eventual resolution will be very satisfying, and people will be happy to know that Spenser has 2 sidekicks before this book is out. One is Hawk, of course, and the other one is Jesse Stone, who is an old boyfriend of Rita's, who I like, much like a manager calling for a right-hander to come out of the bullpen. Jesse comes out of the bullpen, and writing scenes for the 2 of them was really fun.
It was really fun to read too, but it isn't just Hawk And Jesse, you bring in a whole bunch of the Spenser cast. I mean, because Boston's Finest are really unhappy about what has happened to Rita, and Boston's criminal enterprise, they all get involved. So you had a chance to really ring in a great many players in the Spencerverse.
Barbara, we've talked about this before, that his canvas was so rich with interesting people. Martin Quirk, the head cop, is just a fabulous character. Frank Belson is a fabulous character. It is almost impossible for me to write one of these books from Sonny to Jesse to Spenser without Tony Marcus being involved somewhere, because just to get him talking is one of the most enjoyable things about having picked up Bob's characters.
Right.
But yeah, and then in addition to everything else, because Rita is hovering between life and death, even Susan Silverman's heart softens towards her nemesis, Rita, who's been hitting on Spenser for about 600 years.
That's right. I mean, you have made some alterations in the Susan Silverman character. I mean, so just to review, we first came across Mike in the Spencerverse with Sonny. So Sonny Randall, and he came to the store and with his first Sonny Randall. And it was great fun. And I was just delighted because Mike has really got that voice. Parker has always been the dialogue king. And, here's Mike, same mouthy, same irreverent sense of humor, same, whatever. And also friend of Bob, which helps a lot. So there we were with Sonny. And then Mike, became Jesse. And so that was a whole different thing. And Jesse has had the most number of writers following Bob, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jesse's life has changed a lot, depending on who was writing him, and for the better, in my opinion, because Bob kind of got stuck in that, that off and on, man-woman thing that he was.
Oh my God! With his Jesse's first wife, he finally stopped with Jen, and
Right.
it finally stopped. I've never felt that way about Spenser and Susan Silverman. This dates me slightly, but there's a Hepburn Tracy quality to that relationship.
Well, and
they're equals too. That's what's great.
No, they definitely are, but they were not dysfunctional. They drifted apart for a while there, which was actually a reflection of Bob's own life and his own marriage, because he had a similar issue with his own wife. But anyway, Spenser and Susan were never, neither of them is a drunk. Neither of them, was. I mean, Jesse had his failed career in baseball, and he had his drinking problem, and the woman was terrible for him, and it was a different thing. But Bob really liked that relationship where there was a strong tie, and the guy just couldn't abandon it.
Yeah, I mean, and before Bob passed away, I mean, it was interesting because there's in, I think it's Cold Service, Jesse shows up in a Spenser novel when they're on a stakeout, and with Sonny Karnofsky's daughter up in Paradise, and then Jesse and Sonny had a relate. You could tell near the end of Bob's life that he was very interested in the possibility of Jesse and Sonny being an ongoing romantic relationship, and I brought them back together, and then of course Rita, any good-looking guy, with a gun and a badge, she's going to be interested in. And so this became personal for Jesse that Rita had been shot, and so he willingly becomes a wingman for Spenser. And I don't want to spoil the ending of the book, but there's a resolution that I think people will find really satisfying.
I really enjoyed it too. I'm going to add a little coda, which is that Sonny and Richie had the same, I mean, there was always that thing about Richie and was Sonny going to, stay away, or whether they're going to get back together, the whole bit. I always liked Richie, and I'll be interested to see Allison Galen, who is now writing Sonny, was here with us, and we had a long conversation about that, which if any of you are interested in, you can watch it on YouTuber on our Facebook thing. So again,
She's so talented. She's so
yeah,
talented.
no, she's great. But again, every author who's writing these characters, has a slightly different, can nudge them in a different direction without betraying what Bob originally set up. Because he did do that kind of on-off thing. So, it's not a travesty to do it yourself.
Yeah, I loved writing every one of those books. I mean, I joke sometimes with Ivan Held, the capo di tutti capo at Putnam, that if Mr. James Brendan Patterson hadn't come into my life, I might be still trying to write all three characters the way Bob once did. And and I've told you the story. I'll tell the story for people who haven't heard it before. I accidentally ended up in the Parker Sphere. I mean, he was my friend. I had read everything and reread the ones that I'd reread. And I'm on my way to a family vacation in Vermont one day, and I'm listening to a Sonny Randall on tape. And Kate Burton, who I think she's still doing a fabulous job as doing the audiobooks. So I got to Vermont, and Esther Newberg, who is not only my literary agent, but she's basically the caretaker of Bob's Literary Trust. And I said, Jesse got continued, Spenser got continued, the Westerns got continued. How come nobody continued Sonny? And I was genuinely curious. And she calls back about an hour later, and she talked to Ivan, and she said, Ivan wants you to write a sample chapter. And I said, no. I have enough to do. I wasn't pitching myself to write a Bob Parker book. And Esther, in her way, said, write the chapter. I get up the next morning. I'm sitting at the dining room table of this rented house up in Vermont, and I write 10 pages that essentially became the first chapter of my first Sonny Randall. And Barbara, as soon as I did, I just felt I was like exactly where I belonged. There's the opening exchange is between Sonny and Spike. And she said, do you think I'm getting older? And Spike says, that's a trick question. And she said, no, the UPS kid mammed me the other day. And Spike says, I assume you shot him. And from that moment on, I just felt I was in my comfort zone. People have asked me, weren't you intimidated? No, this man's voice had been in my head from the time I read the Godwolf manuscript when I was at Boston College. And I read his books. I emailed with him. We conversed. And so I just felt like this was a natural place for me to be. And then Sonny begat Jesse, and Jesse begat Spenser. But as you can see, I'm not ready to give these guys up because they wander into these books.
Well, I don't want you to give up Spenser, and I'd be perfectly happy if you retreated back and wrote Jesse and Sonny again, but I understand for right now. So let me just add, because Mike has mentioned that he's also writing books with James Patterson, but there was a very nice interview with Mike in The Big Thrill. And one of the questions that came up was, how can he keep doing his sports column? And I'm assuming you still are, since this just came out. Are you still writing your sports column?
I still write 2 columns a week for the New York Daily News. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And then you're writing, the Parker book now, just the one, but you're also writing with Patterson. And so the question is, how are you managing all that? And your answer, according to this thing I just read, Lupica says his approach is basically the same. So what does that mean? What is your approach is basically the same?
From the start of my newspaper career, I have had to work in 1,000 word bursts. That's my natural output. It doesn't feel like a lot. That's the length of my column. And when I tell people that, I said, yeah, I try to write that much in a book every day. And there are writers who say, oh my God, if I get a page a day. Well, I never had that luxury as a newspaper columnist. I had a space to fill every day. So that became a normal output. But so you just do the math on that. I write every day. That's one of the things Jim Patterson and I have in common. We do this every single day. And when you write 1,000 pages, 1,000 words a day, think about it. At the end of the week, that's 5,000 or 7,000 words. And those begin to pile up. And all of a sudden, in 3 or 4 months, you've got a book. So I never feel like I'm stressed. I go up I come up here in the morning. I'm in my writing room, and I close the door and I make some coffee, and these characters come to life. And I write till I've kind of written that, and I try to never stop when I'm stuck. You've heard that from various writers. Always, stop it in a good place so you can pick it up the next morning. And so I don't feel like I'm burdened by. I can't believe I get to do this. I don't believe I get to write, to carry on the Spenser books, and to write books with Jim Patterson. I have had this incredibly blessed career, and for me, it's getting better as it goes.
Well, that's certainly true. And of course, all these years that you've been writing columns, then you have developed a routine. You have a system, and you're a very polished writer. You're funny. You like dialogue, and you know how to get to right to the point. Because in a newspaper column, you don't have the luxury of lots of wasted words.
I love being in this world. I always love, as a kid, I loved reading the Travis McGee books. And then along comes Bob Parker to change the game. And so I love this kind of writing. And when I started writing novels, I wrote a few novels with a New York investigative TV reporter named Peter Finley. And I wrote one of them as a TV movie. And then I stopped. I wrote kids' books for years and years and years. But I love being in this community now. I mean, I love working with Jim. Bob Crace has become a friend of mine. The last couple of months, I've had struck up a wonderful, funny email relationship with the great Peter James, who we're finally going to meet up in London in June, and we're going to Duke's, and we're going to have a martini. We're planning this with almost military-like precision.
He's a lovely guy. You will be blinded by his tan. I have spent time with Peter, and
I love the Roy Grace books. I love the Roy Grace books, and just in the last couple of weeks, I have struck up an email or whatever it is, social media, with Lou Berney, who I think is a genius. I mean, he's just
yes.
an awesome, awesome talent. I told him the other day, I said, I don't know how I missed The Long and Far Away Gone, and I should be sent to the penalty box for not having read it.
Patrick is a huge fan of Lou Berney, and we've done a number of events with him. Yeah, he's
awesome.
I'm gonna put in a plug for Grace on Television too, because
I'm watching it. It's terrific.
And I love the guy that I can't think of his name, but I really love.
I think it's John Tim. I might be John Tim. I think.
Well, do you know what's interesting about him? He has a particularly loose stride. When you watch him walk, you notice how his legs, I mean, he's got this kind of loose hip-like stride. You could never mistake him for anybody else. It's almost like Fred Astaire walking or something. And
no, they're good. In fact, I was complaining to Peter. I said, you made me buy BritBox so I could watch Grace. And of course, he told me which episodes to be looking for his extremely brief cameo appearances, because I guess he's made some along the way.
Yes, he has. You will always recognize him by his tan. I swear to you, he is the tannest human being I have ever met, which proves that he is not spending a lot of time in England. But
no, every once in a while, my email will pop up and there'll just be a picture of a martini, and he says, the weekend that begins. And I said, okay.
He's a great guy. I totally agree. One other thing that I would point out to you is that Bob, towards the end of his life, his books got shorter and shorter. The margins in the books got larger and larger, and the page count went down. But you are writing, sort of a normal length, 320, 30 page. History. So you've I don't know what the right word is, because it's not like you were fleshing them out or anything, but Bob has sort of just drilled down to an essence, where it was so spare. There was almost all dialogue. And I like the fact, you're great on all that, but I think that you've filled in, it's a little more texture than Bob.
Thank you. I'll tell you a great story about books that sometimes editors think are too brief. Elmore Leonard delivered, I think it was Pagan Babies, and got a call back from his editor, and I think it was a woman at the time, and she said, I think the book ends rather abruptly, Dutch. And he said, okay. And I said to him, well, what'd you do? He said, I wrote one more page and sent it back. And that was his reaction. These things, they have just a natural rhythm to them, Barbara. I don't ever think, oh, I have to make this word count. I'm trying to tell my story at a proper pace. But there is a point where you sometimes say to yourself, okay, I got to wrap this up now. You know, Jim Patterson and I were working on House of Wolves. And there's a great scene. Anybody who's read it will see it. There's a great scene at the end. But when we finished that scene, I called Jim we talk about 6 times a day on the phone. It's ridiculous. And I said, so what do you think we should do next? Should Jenny go back to San Francisco? He said, Mike, the book's done. I said, well, no, I was just thinking that maybe we could, you know, that scene, he said, the end, we're done. And that the last line is kill or be killed. It was a great way to end that book.
Well, that lets, thrust you forward into whatever is going to come next. So with Patterson, and I'm hoping that you are writing another Spenser. Please tell me you're writing another Spenser.
I am 40,000 words into another Spenser, which of course has no title yet.
Okay.
Oh, I think it does. Wait, I think it does have a title, but I don't think I'm supposed to say it. But yes, it deals with. All right, I'll tell you this much. It deals with a podcaster. It deals with immigration, and it deals with a relationship between the podcaster and the immigration issue. And it's really fun.
It sounds like, well, all your books are wonderful. Now I'm going to add, since that Spenser universe seems to devolve upon us, that Allison Galen, who is working on Sunny, has been to see us, and we have just booked Christopher Farnsworth, who is taking over Jesse.
Jesse, yeah.
And
Esther's really excited about that book. Esther's yeah.
Well, he'll be with us on February 7th.
Oh, good.
And unlike Mike, who is too busy to come to Scottsdale these days, Christopher is coming in person. I know.
Well, we just went over how I'm up here, locked in this room, writing 1,000 words a day, and you would not want me to. You wouldn't want to take me away from that, would you?
I would. I would like you to write your 1,000 words on the airplane. Come on, every once in a while, it would be great. Now, I have a story that I really enjoy telling, and I hardly ever get a chance to, but this is a true story. So last year, when Mike wrote Broken Trust, he had a scene in a restaurant in Boston.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a map of Boston in the books, which is really helpful because, you've got like Susan over here and Spenser over here and, the Harbor Club over here. And I've stayed at the Boston Harbor Hotel, so you know what all that is. But anyway, Mike is writing about a meeting or dinner in this restaurant.
I think Spenser and Susan are having dinner there. Yeah.
I think it was a romantic meal and a view out the window of not the Boston Common, but some kind
public garden. The public garden is across Boylston Street. Yep.
And it all sounded wonderful. Now, I had just been signed up by author Dana Stabenow, who wanted to run up to Boston. I love this. We run up to Boston for 2 days to see the John Singer Sargent show at the Museum of Fine Arts the first weekend in January. We'll talk about snow in a minute. But anyway, I'm reading this and I thought, I wonder if this could actually be a real restaurant. It just sounds wonderful. No, I thought, no. Mike's just made this up, because that's what happens in fiction. But my phone was handy. So I thought, I'll just Google Bistro DVD, just in case it's a real restaurant. Why not, So indeed, it was a real restaurant. So whipping out Open Table, I thought, all right, I will book it for this Saturday night that we're in Boston. And Open Table wrote back and said, we're sorry, this restaurant is booked all the way through January, and we don't have we can't take any reservations. So I was really sad for a couple hours. And then I thought, I'm just going to call them because Open Table doesn't always have the whole
No,
restaurant.
they don't. That's actually a
That's
fact.
it.
Right.
So I called and left a message, and they called back, and I said that I had been reading a new novel about Spenser set in Boston by Mike Lupica, and he had written movingly of the restaurant, and I wondered if we could come to dinner. Well, they were overcome. They were so excited to be featured in a book. So we made a date, we made a reservation. So when I got to Boston, it still wasn't snowing. That's to come. We went to the Singer Sargent show and then drifted down eventually at dinner time to the Bistro du Midi, where we were met by the owner. We were escorted upstairs to a corner table overlooking the garden. The chef prepared a special
Barbara,
meal.
you were trying to score a free meal off of my
I
book.
was not. I mean, no. But we did pay for some of it, but they did give us some gorgeous wine, gorgeous table, terrific service, special dishes from the chef. I mean, it was just amazing. And, I could see that the idea that they'd been featured in a novel was a really big thing. So I tried to think of what I could do besides pay the check. And when I got home, we had one autographed copy of Broken Trust left, one by Mike. And so I wrapped it all up and I wrote a thank you note and I mailed it off to the Bistro du Midi because I thought they should have it, right? Mark the page so they could find themselves in it. It was so great. And then the next day we got up, and here's a warning to all of you. If American Airlines says to you, you could change your reservation to Monday, this was Sunday, to Monday at no extra charge, you should begin to think seriously of changing your reservation to Monday because there was a storm coming to Boston. Now it looked, if American had had its shit together, like the plane would come in and we would depart before the storm arrived. But there was a maintenance issue and there was this, all right. So I spent, because we foolishly checked out of our hotel and actually went to Logan. I spent an entire day and night at Logan watching it snow, watching them clear the runway, only to have it come back. At some points, you tried to look through the windows of the airport and there was nothing but white out. Right. So, Boston has serious.
You see now, that's the weather.
I know.
Which
exactly.
I begin my next Spenser.
So when I opened this book and I saw the weather, I thought, I've seen that weather. I have seen it through the windows of Logan Airport. Oh my God. The only good thing about that was that I had run out of things to read. So I went down to Hudson's, the bookseller featured in many restaurants. And the only book they had that I hadn't actually read yet or wanted to read was Rebecca Yarros, The Fourth Wing. And I thought, excuse me, that maybe I should read one romantasy novel just to see what it was all about. It's like 700 pages or something. So fortunately, it saw me through the day. And I was so stunned by the lack of logic in the plot, although the sex scenes were absolutely terrific. And I also liked the dragons, that the time kind of passed. But that was my experience at Logan.
There weren't sex scenes with the dragons, were there?
No, I always clarify that. I say romantasy is hot sex and dragons, but not hot sex with dragons. But as a thriller writer, you would have trouble, as did I, in accepting the logic of the plotting.
Oh no,
not an essential part of romantasy.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, just getting back to the restaurant, there's not one made up bar or restaurant in the.
I know, and I had faith in you because Bob always used real places.
Oh no, well here's the thing. I don't know if you know this or not. Maybe you do. I from the time I was 12, I grew up in Nashua, New Hampshire, which is an hour from Boston.
Right.
I went to Boston College. All 4 of my children went to Boston College. I have spent an unbelievable amount of time in my life in Boston, and particularly that area around the Public Garden and Boston Common. That is a permanent part of my spiritual geography. So for me, it is a labor of love to make that world of Boston come to life. There was a day when my wife Taylor and I are in Boston to visit the kids for something, and we weren't going over to BC until later. And I said, I got to do a little scene setting for Sunny. And I think it was before the first Sunny Randall. And so I walk over, I walk through the Public Garden. I'm on Charles Street. I walk past the Charles Street Meeting House, and I walk to the end of that block. and I see this house down there.
Right.
And I'm taking notes, and the woman who lives there comes out and said, "I'm sorry, what are you doing?" And I introduced myself and I said, "Sonny Randall's going to live there in my new book." And that is where she had moved in. Melanie Joan Hall was letting her live at this home of hers at the end off of Charles Street. And yeah, so it's all been big fun for me. I will go to Boston and just walk around and have my phone or my notebook
Sure.
and just be taking pictures of places that I know I'm going to use in the books.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, some of the things that Bob wrote about and included the books are no longer there.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, restaurants come and go. I mean, my rule with restaurants is if you like it, go often because you can't ever be
Well,
sure
the
it will
street
last.
the street bar in which Spenser has spent an uncommon amount of time, you know, first that hotel was the Ritz,
That's right.
then known as the Old Ritz, and then it became the Taj when the new Ritz was on the other side of both parks, and now it's the Newberry. And
Right.
but that bar, I don't know if you've ever been there. That is
I
one of the
have.
great bars in America. It's one of the great, looking out onto Arlington Street, and they have preserved the look, the character, and the feel of that place.
Right. No, my husband and I made a pilgrimage there. And I was slightly confused by the name change, because I started out thinking, well, we'll go, because Spencer and Susan spent a fair amount of time, meeting up there in the bar. And so I didn't realize it had been renamed. So I kept thinking I'm in the wrong bar,
Right, right.
Eventually I worked it out. And no, it was wonderful. We had a drink. I mean, you step down into luxury and it's very classy. And the Boston Public Library is not far, right? It's sort of
No,
down.
but if you walk out of the street bar
Right.
and walk over to Newbury Street and then
Yeah.
walk over to Boylston, you walk down to the public library, and that's why. Again, I've spent so much time in that area. That's where the bombing of the Boston Marathon took
Right.
place, and it was anybody who had ever spent a lot of time in Boston. That was talk about a deeply personal event. That was I remember I was on a phone call. Brian Williams was still doing the NBC Nightly News, and he knew my history with Boston. And the day of the bombing, I was on with him for about a half hour, and then was up there the next day, walking around and watching a wounded city kind of get back up to one knee. Oh no, it's an amazing section of the United States, that part of Back Bay, and it's one, and as you know, it's one of the great walking streets in Americas, and it's now a running gag that Spenser has moved back to Marlborough Street,
Right.
and I forget whether it's Quirk or Belson or one of them. He said, I moved back to Marlborough Street, and Quirk says, even people in outer space know you've moved back to Marlborough
right.
Street. I wasn't comfortable having him live over at the seaport. I needed him to be able to walk to the famous office at Boylston and Berkeley Street.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you. It's quite a long, when I was there in September, the cruise ship came into a different place. The first time I sailed into Boston, I'm trying to think where we sailed out of, but anyway, you were in the big harbor, you sailed past the airport, all of that good stuff. This time we're way south and we are at this new seaport, and it's a long Uber ride to go to the Museum of Fine Arts. But if you stay in the city, then it is very walkable. But I don't think it's walkable from the southern seaport area. It's a long.
No, Boston is a profoundly important character in these books. It's a character. I mean, Bob Crace brilliantly has made Los Angeles a major character with Elvis Cole and Joe Pike. And oh my God, I don't know if you've read it yet. The Big Empty is coming out in January. His new Elvis Cole, Joe Pike, and I'm telling you, it's the best. It's his best.
Really?
It's fabulous.
I've always thought L.A. Requiem was his best. That's
Well, wait till you
all
read
the craze.
Wait till you read. I mean,
The Monkey's Raincoat, was a great introduction, but I really loved L.A. Requiem. It was and it had a wonderful prologue. Do you remember? It goes on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been with him since the Monkey's Raincoat, and we finally met in person about a year ago. We had breakfast in LA. We had a great, long, fabulous we stay in touch all the time, and I'm going to see him again. We're going out to visit. My youngest son lives in Los Angeles now,
Ah.
and yeah, no, he's great.
Well, let me point out to you that if you're going to Los Angeles, you could fly over Phoenix and drop in.
But I won't have a book out then.
Who cares?
Well,
I don't care if you have a book out. You've got lots of books out.
But here's my thing. Here's my thing. We're going out there not only to visit my little boy, but it's going to be my wife's birthday, and you wouldn't want me to, you know.
Oh, listen to this man making excuses. He just doesn't want to come and have lunch with me.
That is not true. I have relatives in Arizona. I just haven't been able the last couple of years to get out. You know, I love your store. You know, I love you, and
I do, but I miss you in person. So, you know, anytime. A book is not essential. Time of day doesn't matter. We're 15 minutes from the airport. It's very efficient, you know, whatever.
One of the best friends I've ever had, who passed away a couple of years ago, was Paul Westphal. Paul Westphal, the great basketball player, the great Phoenix Sun, the coach of the Phoenix Suns. And yeah, we used to go out and see Paul and Cindy all the time. You know where we used to stay? Oh my goodness gracious, the Boulders. We'd go out and stay. The Boulders was that fabulous, so beautiful.
Yeah.
And the smell of mesquite. No, I love the desert. It's too far for where I am.
Your mistake was moving to Florida.
I'm in Florida, and then I'm up on Long Island the rest of the year, and we also have to go to Connecticut because I have these two little grandsons now. So yeah,
my goodness,
I've got a lot of plate, Barbara. I have plates spinning all the time.
You really do, right? And I'm so glad that you can keep them all in motion. So I have to say that Hot Property, I can't remember who I was talking to, but it seems to me that if you're writing in a city, whether it's New York or LA or whatever, if your landscape and your main character or one of your main characters is in fact a city, you can always use property and developers as your bad guys, because that seems to be
right. Yeah.
Most of the corruption, most of the fraud, most of the tension, it all seems to revolve around, you know, allocating land, shifting ownership, you know. I mean, S.J. Roseanne and I had a really good discussion about the potential fate of Chinatown in New York, you know, with her last. And so it's always, I mean, it's constant here in Phoenix, you know, it's just a constant thing about zoning and redeveloping and, you know, and it's not as glamorous to have the money and the corruption in the highway system, which is where a huge part of it is. Right. It seems to be, for purposes of a novel, more glamorous, let's say, if it's going to be, you know, erasing neighborhoods and doing high rises and all that.
The Widette Circle area that these guys are fighting over, that's a real thing. That has been an ongoing process. I don't even know if it's been resolved yet, but that is an actual area, and it just seemed to be a perfect place to have it, because, you know, then you combine the chance at a casino too. I mean, it is, you know, land, developers, casinos. It's you know, the mob isn't involved, but it feels like the mob, you know.
It really does. You know, looking back, because one of my favorite Parkers has always been Mortal Stakes. I mean, I love the baseball background. Yeah. And I thought he had painted himself into a corner he could not possibly write his way out of with Mortal Stakes. But anyway, you know, I was thinking of the conjunction of online betting and all the rest of it, and baseball might be something that you could talk about at some point in a Spenser.
It's, you know, it's funny. It is hard. You can do it. Like when Jim and I did House of Wolves, we created a fictional San Francisco football team. It's harder to create fictional baseball players with people so intensely involved with the Boston Red Sox. Though, so when Spenser talks about players in my books, he's talking about real guys. I mean, his doomed love affair with Mookie Betts is a running gag, and now Betts is with the Dodgers, and Rafael Devers is their young star, and as he says in Hot Property, I had given my heart to another, and so his love for the Red Sox, and Hawk makes fun of him for all the time.
Sure.
He said, "How long are you going to keep crying about some little midget ball player went and play for the Los Angeles Dodgers?" And Spenser says, "Well, it was a very emotional breakup." And so Bob, well, Bob loved the Red Sox, and I mean, it was a great foundation of our friendship was a lot of baseball emails during the baseball season, and because I have honored his love of the Red Sox by having Spenser continue to love
Yes, you have out there with the Green Monster. So I think I've told you that when Bob would, he would stop in, or he would sometimes arrange it. So he would go to Los Angeles for the movie deals or whatever, and then he would always come here. So I would meet him for drinks at the Biltmore, and we would talk, And I remember saying to him one day, "Do you think either of us will live long enough for you to see the Red Sox or me to see the Cubs actually win a pennant?" And we would laugh bitterly and decide that it was never going to happen. And Bob and I used to email very often. And when the Red Sox played that first World Series and it kept going and it looked like, there was some possibility. We got to the end of Game 7. I rose from my chair, went down to my office and opened up my email. I might have told you this. And I wrote to him that I said, "We did it, or you did it. You have lived long enough." And Bob, master of dialogue and all the rest of it, he wrote back, and his email was just, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, love Bob." That was it. It was so great that he lived long enough to see the Red Sox win
He
the
saw
pennant.
him win twice. He saw him win in 2004 and 2007, and they were knocking on the door going back to the World Series in 2000. No, that's how. Yeah, I mean, it was when they came back on the Yankees in 2004.
Right.
I was there. I saw every single game of that
Yeah.
series in person, and it's still the only comparable sports story I've ever covered because of the scope, Yankees, Red Sox, nobody had ever come from 3 games to
Right.
nothing down. Was I was in Lake Placid in 1980 when the United States hockey team beat the Soviets, and I kind of knew that night that because of the world events and because of the circumstances and because of the scope of the upset, I kind of suspected that night that I might have covered the greatest story I'd ever get to cover with my own eyes, and I did. But I'll tell you what, '04, the Red Sox coming back on the Yankees was pretty close.
It was really fabulous. I
And then
still remember.
your team was down 3 games to 1 in
Oh,
2016, and all hope was lost. And the Cubs were going to go back into Cubbydom, and then they did it. They
he
won.
did. I was really happy for my brother, who's been my baby brother, is a lifelong Cubs fan. He's thrown out a pitch at Wrigley Field. He's done, all kinds of stuff. And it wasn't so much for me, but for him that I hoped that they would do that. Anyway, I brought that up because, Spenser and sports are something that, if you run out of property developers and other evildoers, you can go back to sports. So maybe we should call Patrick up and see if anybody has questions that they would
Patrick still, did
ask.
we put Patrick to sleep? Is he napping again?
Oh, he's working away at his computer.
Oh, there. I'm sorry, Patrick. I'm sorry.
There he is.
Yeah, you interrupted my evening siesta. No. Yeah, let's see. There are some good questions here. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, our friend Stefania is joining us from Italy. She's one of our customers, who's always tuning in. And she has
Congratulations on the Davis Cup. That was I'm a tennis guy. I was very happy to see Italy win the Davis Cup again.
Let's see. She says, when you start to write a book, do you already have in mind how the story will end? Do you create first the story or the characters? So in this case, you have your characters.
I have a general sense, and having worked with Jim Patterson, I understand the value of the outline. And you never stick completely to the outline because the story, the characters take over. But I have a general sense of how it's going to end. It's like I think it was Dr. O who said this, that writing a book is like traveling down a country road in the night, and you can just see to the end of the light from your headlights, and you can't see anything beyond that. I don't believe that's true. I think you have to have a grander vision of how you're going. This book, I did not know the mechanics of how it was going to end. And then it just came to me one day, and there's a scene at the end, and I won't tell who the bad guy is or anything like that. But Jesse and Hawk and Spenser, my new three musketeers, do some good thwarting. Let's put it that way. Some excellent thwarting.
Another question is, how much has the innovation of technology changed your way of writing or the construction of your stories? Yeah, a lot of technology can influence
Patrick, I
story.
think we've had this conversation before.
Yep.
The cell phone is the devil. The cell phone, it makes it too easy for cops and detectives to track people. I am constantly looking for ways in my books to take the phone out of the pocket. I still want there to be an element of Spenser walking up a flight of stairs and knocking on a door, or walking down an alley, or following somebody. And cell phones, and then they make cars too smart, where you can oh, we went from there to there to there to there to there to there, and it drives you crazy. It makes you want to go and set one back in the 70s when Bob started writing these books in the first place.
You want carburetors, you want
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you got to write a letter, and there's only no. I mean, it sounds like this sounds like, hey, you kids, get off my lawn with your cell phones, because cell phones, they take a lot of the magic out of the mystery solving. And
yeah.
so I constantly look for ways to make it harder, even in the world of technology.
And you know what's interesting? If you watch, BritBox, for example, British crime shows, there is nowhere in England that is not covered by CCTV. And
Oh
so
my God! I mean, Peter James is just his research is just, I am in awe of it. Okay, because I still got a guy who, I'm still operating under the Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler theory. Okay, when things slow down, have a guy come through the door with a gun. Those were the days. Those were the days.
Yeah. Do you ever watch The First 48, that kind of police documentary?
No, no, it's good.
It's such a great series because it's real stuff. But the only reason
I'm a
I
slow horses addict, fanatic.
that's
I am so deeply in that series. As great as the books are, I swear the TV series is just off the hook. Great. When I just ended season 4, I can't believe that I have to wait until next fall for season 5.
wasn't Gary Oldman just perfectly
Oh
cast?
my God!
Yeah.
But they're all perfect. I mean, the kid, is it Jack Loudon, or everybody in it is just great. It's pitch perfect. But Oldham, I mean, this is a guy who won an Oscar for Winston Churchill. This is the part of a lifetime for Jackson Lamb. Oh no, I am an absolute addict for that series.
Yeah, the only reason I brought up First 48 is that the police are always looking on social media because a lot of their knucklehead criminals are posting about
Right.
what they do.
Yeah. No, Spenser, in the one I'm writing, he has finally broken down, and I've got this cool young kid, kind of a street kid who's a genius, who's now become his social media guy, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with this character.
Oh, that should be fun. I
Yeah,
remember Larry Block doing a somewhat similar thing with Matthew Scudder, having some young kid as his
yeah, yeah.
translator of modern technology kind of thing.
Well, I have 4 children, and so the running joke in my life is, whenever I run into a brick wall, It's have dad will call you. Have dad call Zach, or have dad call Alex, or have dad call Chris or Hannah, because I and oh yeah, when you talk about CCTV cameras, okay, I am constantly looking for ways that they went out or somebody busted them. I can't deal with it. I don't want Big Brother to be watching. I want Spenser to be watching. I want him to figure out stuff. And he kind of does.
Yeah. And when you watch dramatizations, one of the things that the characters have to do is disable the CCTV or shroud themselves so the CCTV.
Yeah, no, I'm the great disabler.
Yeah.
Oh, trust me.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, when you're watching it, visually, you have to go to the British shows. You have to go to a lot of trouble to conceal yourself from CCTV.
I just don't. You have to have a certain amount of technology, and I have a great suburban Boston police captain named John Fisher, who I can't do these books without. And
Ah,
I'll say, okay, there's no preamble to the emails I'll send them. I say, okay, Captain, here's the setup, da 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 da, and I'll get this email back. And he has been an unbelievable natural resource for me.
how wonderful.
Wow, that's great.
He lived up the street from my parents and became like part of our family. He lived like 200 yards from where my parents lived in Nashua, and he's brilliant. I'll say, like, the book Jim and I are also working on, because of course, see, Barbara, I would come to Phoenix, but I'm kind of working on two books at once, and so I said to him the other day, I said, okay, what happens when a bullet hits a windshield? And got an immediate tutorial, and because he said, they break up in the movies. He said it doesn't really work that way. It would have to be birdshot hitting it, and there would be some glass. I said, oh, that's exactly what I need.
So they just spider web.
Yeah, but I wanted a little smattering of glass in the front seat of the F-150.
Gotcha. Let's see. On YouTube, Fred, he says that he's read the first 29 Spenser novels in order. Can he skip ahead and read Hot Property?
Absolutely. I got a wonderful review in Book Page, and I have it somewhere, but it's not important. What's important is the guy got it, and he said it fits seamlessly into the progression of Spenser novels, or you can start here. And I take great pride in that.
Wow.
You can read this as a standalone. I mean, you take it on faith that whoever's going to pick it up knows that who Hawk is, that Hawk's his sidekick, and his his equal, and that he's in love with Susan Silverman. No, you can pick up Hot Property and say, and then you go back and you read Broken Trust, and then go back and read like some of my real Cold Service. Like Cold Service was my favorite, the one where Hawk gets shot at the very beginning and nearly dies, and it turns out to be the Ukrainian mob, and it's in this up in Marshport. Oh, it's great.
Is there a sense of it's a responsibility, obviously, to do this. Is there a Bible that you go to, or are there things where you feel like, you know what, I couldn't do this? Are there with the series?
No, there's Barbara, you can help me out. Somebody wrote a book about a Spenser book about people, places, and things. I have it here, and it kills
Well,
me.
it is probably, all updated online somewhere,
No, but
it's
there's
like a Bible.
I would get up and walk over to my bookcase, but
Yeah.
it will take too much time to do it. But Patrick, here's what I've said from the start. I've now written 10 Parkers. Sonny's, Jesse's. This is my second Spenser. I consider myself the caretaker of a public trust. I take this extremely seriously, because I know that this man wrote, and again, Jesse was great, Sonny's great, but Spenser is one of the great creations in the history of this genre. And because I knew him, and because I considered him a friend, again, I'm the caretaker of an extremely important public trust. So I never took lightly that I was allowed to be in this world. and I never took lightly that I have been able to carry on these characters in a way that again, if you read the reviews of all 10 of these books, they're all the same. People say the same things about the spirit of Bob and the characters, and believe me, it makes me extremely proud.
For sure. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Anything else here? Have you read all of the Spenser novels? Somebody
Yeah.
asked.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. No,
You
you know,
do.
when I was living in New York City, every year when a Spencer it was a huge, I mean, the first day it was out, I was at I was there. And then once I got to know Bob, I was lucky enough to get a copy, maybe a little bit in advance. Oh no, that year's Spencer was always a huge literary event for me.
Let's see. Have there been is there talk of any recent TV adaptations?
Well, listen, I don't.
I know
That,
Ace
that
Ace had
Netflix movie
that
was a mess
experience.
with Mark Wahlberg. It just to me, I mean, these are talented people, and Peter Berg is the guy who was, did it, and I think it did okay on Netflix. But I mean, he's an ex. Spencer's an ex-con. It to me,
Yeah.
it almost made fun of these characters. I stopped watching it. Again, I don't want to get into a beef with those guys, but you know, the old Robert Urich. I'll tell you what I think of the TV movies that were made, even though he didn't physically look like you imagine Spencer looked like. Joe Mantegna, I thought those A&E movies, I think they were A&E movies, I thought were terrific, atmospheric, and I'm so honored that Joe still reads I always send him an email and tell him how great it is to hear my words in his voice. That attitude. If anybody who's never listened to a Spencer book, and Joe's been doing them for years and years and years and years, they're great. I I will actually go out on a long walk, and even though I wrote the book, it's not to hear my words; it's to hear Joe Mantegna saying my words.
Yeah. Yeah. We heard him on a car trip. I'm trying to remember where we were. We listened to, I can't, maybe it was Cold Service, actually, now that I
He's
think of
great.
it.
It's just
Yeah.
awesome. I'm a big books on. I take a long walk every day. So in addition to whatever book I'm reading at the time, I'll have a book, that'll take me through a week of long walks, and I find it extremely enjoyable.
I think that's about it for questions.
All right. Well, I think we've covered pretty much all the territory. We will leave you with a happy thought that there will be another Spencer next year.
And I'll probably be there. It's just any minute. I mean, it's right. That trip to Scottsdale
All
is.
right. Well, I just one time or other would love to get you here, but you know what?
You're going to get me there. I
I love
promise
you.
I'll come back.
I love you too much to wish you coming to Scottsdale during Thanksgiving week, which has to be like the worst week of the year to travel here. So it's going to need to be a different pub date.
No,
Or we'll just work it out at some other point.
we'll work it out, or maybe Patterson and I will show up one of these
That'd
days.
be really fun. We have a new 600 person venue. So, if you,
I'll just tell you this because now we have to go. When he and I we go on the road for a week every
Right.
summer. We have a book usually comes out at the end of July, and we speak in it's these huge crowds every night, and it's just big stupid fun. We have so much fun, and I told you before we started today, uh, tomorrow morning, what I don't know when everybody will watch this. We've done this before. Jim and I will be on Morning Joe. I'll be talking about House of Cross, and he'll be talking about Hot Property. Literally and figuratively, it's cross promotion.
it is. Well, I'm sure everybody will enjoy it. You can always record Morning Joe and watch it later with your coffee. It's wonderful to see you, Mike. Thank you very much for spending time with us, and thank you for signing our books. And as Patrick said, we don't have many copies left, but
It's always. I was telling my wife this today, and I will say it to you guys before I go. This store is one of the capitals of what we do, And so much as I consider it an honor to write these books, I always consider it an honor to be involved with Poison Pen again.
Well, thank you, Mike. That's extremely kind of you to say so. And it's certainly our treat. I'm so pleased that, we started with the first Sunny and here we are ever since, because I don't have a lot of opportunity to talk to you about sports. I mean, your sports column career is not one that's probably going to flourish here, but the literary one certainly is.
Come for
Happy
spring
Thanksgiving.
training.
What, honey?
I said he should come for spring training.
Yeah, that's true. That would be really magnificent.
Happy Thanksgiving, you too.
You bet. We're not going to nag you any further. Honestly, I promise I won't do that.
Right.
Right.